Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at an incredibly powerful text provided by the You Need Faith in Jesus team series.
That's right.
We're focusing on Psalm 3 from the King James Version. And our mission today isn't just to, read through these 8 verses.
No, not at all.
We really want to excavate the profound, practical truths that are hidden inside this ancient prayer. Because if you, the listener, have ever felt completely overwhelmed, maybe outnumbered, or even betrayed by someone close to you, this short psalm, it offers a revolutionary blueprint for finding peace.
And revolutionary is exactly the right word. To really feel the power of that peace, we have to start with the crisis that birthed this psalm in the first place.
The context.
Context is everything. The title itself is it's just devastating. It's the lens for every single word. It reads, "A Psalm of David when he fled from Absalom, his son."
And that just changes the entire emotional landscape, doesn't it?
That's a gut punch.
I mean, David, this is the warrior king, the man who faced down giants and empires. And he's writing this prayer not while fighting some foreign enemy,
No.
but while he's running for his life from his own family. The source material points us right to 2 Samuel chapter 15. This isn't just a military problem. It's profound personal heartbreak.
Absolutely. What we see there is a king in just utter humiliation. David is fleeing Jerusalem.
Yeah.
He's going up the Mount of Olives, weeping, with his head covered, walking barefoot. I mean, that is the visual definition of despair and disgrace.
Wow.
And you have to remember, the betrayal wasn't just Absalom. It was people like Ahithophel, his most trusted advisor.
The chief counselor, right?
Exactly. So this is a complete collapse, institutional, personal, everything.
So what you're saying is this psalm is not some, abstract poem written in a quiet study.
Not at all. It's a raw, immediate prayer. It's a cry that comes from a life or death crisis fueled by the deepest possible grief, betrayal by his own son, a son he loved deeply.
So this is faith forged in fire. It's the ultimate trial of heartbreak and mortal danger hitting all at once.
And that's exactly why it is so relevant to you, the listener, today. Few of us face an army of 10,000.
Right.
But all of us at some point face betrayal. We face overwhelming debt or a sudden illness or attacks on our reputation. This psalm lays out the pattern for a prayer that can move you from that raw, honest lament to unshakable, confident praise.
And it really answers the core question for this whole discussion, which is how do you find that that supernatural peace, that kind of rest, when everything around you, including your own family, is in complete and utter chaos?
David shows us the path.
And that path, it starts with just being radically honest about the pain itself.
Exactly, the agony of the attack.
Okay, so let's jump right into the text and feel the intensity here in the opening lines.
Wow.
What I love is that David models this vulnerability for us. He doesn't give us a cleaned up spiritual version of his despair.
No, he's brutally honest.
Completely. About the scale of the threat. He starts with this cry in Psalm chapter 3, verse 1. Lord, how are they increased that trouble me? Many are they that rise up against me.
That word increased is so important here. The King James really captures just the sheer volume of the threat.
That feels like it's multiplying.
That's what the original Hebrew suggests. They are multiplying, they're accumulating, and it's happening fast. David isn't exaggerating, he's stating a panicked fact.
Right.
Absalom's rebellion had this terrifying momentum. It was a political and military tidal wave. It felt completely overwhelming.
And I think what David models for us, which is such a powerful first step, is he gives us permission to acknowledge the size of the opposition.
Yes.
We don't have to pretend our troubles are small to be spiritual. We can, and really we must, pour out the raw, honest truth that, God, I feel completely outnumbered here.
And if you're a listener who feels like your burdens are just increasing daily, David gives you the very words for that prayer. But the physical threat, as bad as it is, it's just the setup for the deeper, far more painful attack that he describes in the very next verse. The opposition isn't just content with taking his kingdom or his life. They're aiming directly at the heart of his faith.
And that's got to be the deepest wound a person of faith can receive.
In Psalm chapter 3, verse 2, the attack shifts from the physical to spiritual humiliation, he writes. Many there be which say of my soul, there is no help for him in God. Selah.
That is just agonizing.
Yeah.
Because they are attacking the absolute core of David's identity.
Right, his relationship with God.
Exactly. They're suggesting his entire history, his covenant, his reliance on the Almighty, it's all been exposed as a sham. They're basically pointing and saying, look at David. He trusted his God. Where's his help now? God has abandoned him.
And that is such a common experience, isn't it? When we face a serious crisis, the world, or maybe even that voice inside our own head, it starts to mock our faith.
It does.
It says, if you were really blessed, if God really loved you, this wouldn't be happening to you. And what's so sobering is realizing that this exact strategy of spiritual warfare, it's unchanged throughout history. This line, there is no help for him in God, is designed to shatter both honor and hope.
And we see the ultimate parallel of that taunt at the cross, don't we?
We absolutely do. This agonizing taunt was leveled directly at the Lord Jesus. If you turn to Matthew chapter 27, verse 43, the chief priests and scribes, the religious leaders,
The ones who should have known better.
they're the ones mocking him, saying, he trusted in God, let him deliver him now if he will have him, for he said, I am the Son of God. It's the exact same accusation David faced. Your God has failed you, your faith is useless.
So when you feel that sting, you're actually walking a path of faithfulness that both David and Christ walked.
You are.
And then right after this moment of deepest despair, this spiritual insult, we get this word, Selah.
Selah. David puts this, it's a liturgical instruction right at this point of crisis. Now, its exact musical meaning is debated, maybe it's a pause, maybe an instrumental swell. But its theological function here is crystal clear. It's a mandatory stop sign.
You can't just rush past the hurt.
You cannot, you have to pause. You have to acknowledge the weight of that despair, feel the pain of being attacked at the very core of your faith, and just let that sink in before God.
So you're acknowledging the pain, but you're not letting the pain write the conclusion. The Selah forces you to process it.
It creates this space, this chasm between the enemy's declaration of abandonment and David's upcoming declaration of faith.
Okay, so if you're struggling, feeling outnumbered, or if the enemy is using your circumstances to mock your faith, the first step is to model David.
That's right.
Pour out that raw, honest truth to God, and then Selah, pause, and prepare to move.
That pause, that Selah after verse 2, it's like the dramatic moment right before a hinge swings. Because this next verse, verse 3, it marks this incredibly decisive change in atmosphere in the entire psalm. It's a word of just resolute faith.
The perspective completely flips. David stops looking at the waves of trouble, which are, they're overwhelming him.
Right.
And he turns his gaze instead to the unchanging, glorious character of God. And that whole shift is contained in one single magnificent word.
But
But
thou, O Lord, art a shield for me, my glory, and the lifter up of mine head. That but is not a wish. It's a conscious, deliberate, muscular choice of faith.
it's like he's standing in the middle of a battlefield saying, I hear you, I see the armies, but my God is who he says he is.
Exactly. And this one verse has 3 powerful declarations, and each one directly counters a specific part of David's crisis.
So let's break that down. The first one, God, the shield.
Okay, so think about it. David is exposed. He's running through the wilderness. He has no physical defenses left. He is, for all intents and purposes, defenseless.
And so he declares God to be his active, present protection. A shield is something that stands between you and the danger.
It's an interposing force. He's recognizing that his safety doesn't rely on his own speed or the few men he has left or finding a good hiding spot.
And this isn't a new idea he's inventing. It connects all the way back to the foundation of the covenant relationship.
Yes.
It echoes God's foundational promise to Abraham, back in Genesis chapter 15, verse 1. Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward.
Exactly. He is claiming a covenant certainty established centuries before him. He's saying, the God who protects his covenant people is right now, actively, standing between me and Absalom's soldiers.
Wow. Okay, so the second declaration directly counters the personal humiliation he's feeling.
God, my glory.
We talked about him fleeing with his head covered, weeping. His public honor, his worth, his kingship, it was all shattered by this shameful flight from his own capital. He was a disgraced king.
And in the ancient world, that posture head covered barefoot was the ultimate sign of public humiliation and mourning. So David had zero glory in the eyes of his people.
His crown was gone. Reputation ruined.
Right. But by declaring God as his glory, David is stating that his true source of reputation and worth comes only from God himself.
Not from his title.
Not from his title, not from his public image. So even if the entire nation mocks him and strips him of everything, His real intrinsic worth is intact because it rests in the King of Kings.
That is a powerful lesson for us. When your reputation is slandered, when you get overlooked for a promotion, when relationships fail, your value is not up for negotiation if your glory rests in God.
Your circumstances just cannot define your value.
Which leads perfectly into the third declaration.
The perfect remedy to that posture of shame. God, the lifter up of mine head.
This is maybe the most vivid image in the whole psalm. You can just picture David bowed down in shame and grief and defeat, his chin on his chest, avoiding everyone's gaze.
For a king to be in that bowed position is unthinkable. So for God to be the lifter up of mine head, it signifies God literally, physically restoring his dignity.
Wiping away the shame.
Yes, replacing that posture of defeat with one of hope. It's an act of sovereign encouragement.
So it's a declaration that God doesn't just protect the body. The shield, he restores the spirit, the dignity.
Yes. He's not just praying for survival. He is praying for the restoration of his royal spirit. He's recognizing that even while he's running barefoot through the desert, he is still God's anointed.
God hasn't abandoned his covenant.
He has not. It's a powerful message for anyone listening today who feels shame or defeat. God wants to physically and emotionally lift your chin out of that dust.
So the application is so clear. When life hits, you have to consciously and decisively choose the but.
You have to.
You have to stop dwelling on the enemy's voice in verse 2 and replace it with these proactive, powerful declarations about who God is from verse 3.
It's a decision. It moves you from just reacting to the crisis to asserting the truth.
And following that huge pivot in perspective, David's attention then immediately shifts, right?
It does. It goes from who God is to the effectiveness of his connection with God. The faith he just asserted leads directly to the certainty that God has not only heard him, but has already responded.
And he makes a point of saying his communication was deliberate. It wasn't, just a fleeting thought.
No.
It was an audible cry. He voiced his desperation.
He says in verse 4 of Psalm 3, I cried unto the Lord with my voice, and he heard me out of his holy hill. Selah.
What's really remarkable there is the tense he uses. He states with total confidence that God heard him. It's past tense.
It's already done.
As if the answer is already secured, even though the battle is still looming. He's stating a fact of faith, not just a request of hope.
And that detail out of his holy hill adds so much depth. The holy hill is Mount Zion, Jerusalem, where the Ark of the Covenant, representing God's special presence, was. And that is the very place David had just been forced to flee from.
So he's out in the dusty wilderness, but he's declaring that God heard him from the place he just had to abandon.
Isn't that powerful? It proves that God's ability to hear and respond isn't limited by David's physical circumstances or his location.
He might have lost access to the physical sanctuary.
But he had not lost access to the sanctuary of God's presence. David is asserting that his prayer reached heaven from the dirt floor of his exile.
And there's real power in that, in the intentionality of vocalized prayer. If you just think a prayer, it can be fleeting. But voicing it, crying out loud, it's a powerful, intentional act of faith.
Yeah.
It directs your trust, and it lets you find certainty in his hearing power.
It solidifies that inner conviction that you're not just speaking into the void. And this is something the New Testament explicitly commands us to embrace.
Right, that confidence David shows, it fuels our own boldness, like we see in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need.
David's experience under the Old Covenant is our encouragement under the New. And notice the placement of Selah again here.
The second one.
The second Selah, but its function is totally different. The first was a pause for despair.
Right.
The second Selah is a pause for profound gratitude, for affirmation, for confidence. It's telling everyone, stop, meditate on this. God has heard you. Let that sink in.
So we need to be both bold and vocal in our need. Because of Jesus, we know God hears the cry of his people from his heavenly throne, no matter where we are or how impossible things look.
And the certainty that he has heard you is the fuel for the very next step. Rest.
Okay, so having moved from this raw crisis to the absolute certainty of God's attention, David now presents what might be one of the most astonishing declarations of faith in the whole Bible.
It is. His certainty that he was heard leads to this immediate, tangible, physical result of supernatural rest.
A rest that just defies circumstances. I mean, we can't overstate his situation. He's on the run, surrounded by tens of thousands of enemies. His own son is hunting him.
Yes.
And yet he's able to experience true, deep rest. He says in Psalm chapter 3, verse 5, I laid me down and slept. I awaked, for the Lord sustained me.
I laid me down and slept. Just think about that. That is revolutionary. In his position, every logical impulse, every human instinct would be screaming at him to stay awake.
To patrol, to worry, to plan.
To constantly worry. So to choose to lie down and intentionally surrender consciousness in the face of imminent death, that is not a human decision. That is an act of radical, divine trust.
The sleep itself is a form of worship then, isn't it?
It is the ultimate statement of dependence. It's saying, I've done all I can do, and now I trust my sustainer to watch over me while I am completely vulnerable.
And we often mistake peace for, the absence of trouble. David shows us that true peace is the ability to rest soundly right in the middle of the trouble.
And for anyone listening today dealing with betrayal or financial crisis, this is the challenge. Can you transfer the responsibility for your safety and future onto God for just one night?
You mentioned a New Testament parallel earlier, the Apostle Peter.
Yes, he's the perfect illustration of this. He's in prison, literally chained, and he's facing execution the very next day.
And what does he do?
Acts chapter 12, verse 6 tells us Peter was sleeping between two soldiers bound with two chains. He was arguably in a more certain life or death situation than David, yet he was sound asleep. That peace is only explained by the same supernatural sustaining power.
He understood that his worry wasn't going to change the outcome.
Exactly. If God wanted him dead, staying awake wouldn't save him. If God intended to save him, his worry was completely useless.
And David is clear about the source of his rest. He says he woke up.
For the Lord sustained me.
Not because his guards were good.
No. The Hebrew word for sustained is profound. It implies this continuous active support and preservation. It means God was literally holding him up, watching over his breathing while he was in that vulnerable state.
So God didn't just passively allow him to sleep. God actively sustained him through the night.
And this is so critical for us. When anxiety keeps you awake, it's often because you are trying to sustain yourself through worry.
Right.
The necessary action to receive this kind of supernatural rest is that conscious, intentional handing over of your safety to God. You have to stop trying to hold yourself up.
And what does that rest produce?
It leads directly to supernatural courage. The confidence he gained from just one night of peace, knowing God sustained him. It leads to utter fearlessness the next morning.
This is where the numbers just become irrelevant. He says in Psalm chapter 3, verse 6, I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people that have set themselves against me round about.
Look at the comparison there. In verse 1, he was lamenting how many increased against him.
Yeah.
Now, in verse 6, he explicitly names the overwhelming number, 10,000s, and declares he's no longer afraid.
The fear is gone.
Completely erased by one night of sustained rest. He stopped counting his enemies and started counting his God.
And it's that ultimate shift in the mathematics of faith, isn't it?
Right.
When God is on your side, the number of the opposition, even if it's 10,000, becomes completely irrelevant.
This is the exact same realization that Elisha's servant had to grasp when they were surrounded.
Oh, right. In 2 Kings.
Yes, 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 16. The servant is panicking, and Elisha just calmly says, Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them.
David realized that same spiritual reality. When God is your shield and your sustainer, you have an unseen spiritual army that's far greater than any physical army.
That's it. True stability is rooted in that conscious choice to trust God's sustaining power. And it changes your posture from cowering in fear to standing firm, no matter how big the threat looks.
And that rest is the prerequisite for what comes next, which is the battle cry. David's confidence doesn't lead to passivity.
No, quite the opposite. It empowers him to pray a bold, specific, and honestly aggressive prayer for God to move.
This is him moving from desperation to a specific request for action. He knows he's sustained, and now he's asking for the victory.
He says in Psalm chapter 3, verse 7, Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for thou hast smitten all mine enemies upon the cheekbone. Thou hast broken the teeth of the ungodly.
The phrase, arise, O Lord, is a plea for God to physically enter the fight.
It's an appeal based on God's history as a divine warrior. It echoes the prayer tradition of the Israelites going all the way back to the wilderness.
When the ark was moved.
Exactly. It's a formalized liturgical request for immediate intervention. We see it in Numbers chapter 10, verse 35, where Moses would pray, Rise up, Lord, and let thine enemies be scattered. David is essentially asking for a divine military deployment on his behalf.
Okay, but the challenging part of this verse is how specific he is. Smite them on the cheekbone, break the teeth of the ungodly. That sounds highly aggressive, almost vindictive.
It does.
How do we reconcile that with, say, the New Testament teaching to love your enemies?
And that's a really important question for the listener to grapple with. We have to view this through the lens of David's role as the anointed king.
Okay.
He's not praying merely as a private citizen seeking personal revenge. He's praying as the embodiment of God's established rule on earth. Absalom's rebellion was treason against God's anointed.
So it's an act of wickedness against God's order, not just a family squabble.
Precisely. So his prayer is for vindication, not just survival. He asks for two things that carry massive cultural weight. First, striking someone on the cheekbone. This wasn't a death blow. It was an act of extreme insult and public humiliation in that culture. So David is asking God to publicly humble and disgrace the arrogant enemy who had mocked his faith back in verse 2.
So it's the visible public answer to their mockery. God restoring David's dignity by humiliating those who humiliated him.
Exactly. And then the second image, breaking the teeth of the ungodly.
Which is a powerful metaphor.
It is. The wicked are often depicted in the Psalms as ferocious predators, like lions, whose only intent is to devour. By breaking their teeth, you render that predator completely harmless.
You shatter their fangs. So he's praying for God to neutralize their capacity to do harm.
He's praying for disarmament. It's an aggressive prayer, yes, but it's directed against the power of the opposition. He's asking God to remove their ability to harm him and his people permanently.
So the practical application for us is pretty profound. When we pray for deliverance, we should fuel our faith by remembering God's proven character as a deliverer. And we can pray specifically for God to disarm and humiliate the sources of opposition, to render their power, their teeth, completely ineffective against us.
And that brings us to the final verse of the psalm, which provides the ultimate universal theological conclusion to this entire personal journey.
Right. After all this, the despair, the confidence, the battle cry, David ends by centering all the glory back on the ultimate source of help.
He says in Psalm chapter 3, verse 8, "Salvation belongeth unto the Lord. Thy blessing is upon thy people." Selah.
That is the core doctrine in a single line. Salvation, which in Hebrew is a broad concept, right?
Very broad. Deliverance, preservation, rescue, healing, ultimate spiritual redemption. All of it comes from God alone. It is entirely his work, his power. It's not dependent on David's planning or his small army.
It prevents any form of self-congratulation. It ensures that no matter how the battle turns out, David knows the deliverance was from God.
It's the realization that only God can save. We see the same humbling truth declared elsewhere, maybe most dramatically by Jonah.
From the belly of the great fish.
Yes. In Jonah chapter 2, verse 9, he says, "Salvation is of the Lord." When you are at your absolute lowest point, you quickly understand the uselessness of human strength. The ultimate source of all help is the Lord.
And the purpose of David's whole journey in this psalm is really realized in that final phrase. He shifts the focus from his own intense personal ordeal
To a communal, outward-looking perspective.
He broadens the blessing.
He doesn't end by saying, "My victory is complete," or "Thank you for saving me." He declares, "Thy blessing is upon thy people."
So his personal deliverance becomes a platform for worship and for this generous prayer for the whole community of faith.
Even for those who may have sided with Absalom but are still considered thy people, it shows this profound transformation from personal anxiety in verse 1 to a broad kingdom perspective in verse 8.
So when God delivers you personally, the response should always lean to intercession for others. You let the blessing flow outward.
It's the ultimate sign of spiritual health. His trial and his deliverance are used to secure God's favor on the collective body of believers.
And then that final Selah. It closes the entire emotional and theological journey.
It does. It's a final, profound pause, not of question, but of solemn affirmation. It instructs us to meditate deeply on this truth. God's sovereign power is the beginning, middle, and end of our story.
The deliverance we seek in any area of our life is found in Him.
So our final takeaway is this. No matter what kind of deliverance you need, spiritual, emotional, physical, always look to the Lord as the exclusive source. And let your personal experience of His help always lead you to worship and intercession for others.
So we've just navigated the complete emotional and theological journey of Psalm 3. We started with the raw lament, the sting of that spiritual mockery in verses 1 and 2.
Recognizing that we have to be honest about our despair.
Then we hit that decisive pivot, the word but, And those powerful declarations of God as our shield, our glory, and the lifter up of our head in verse 3.
Establishing that our dignity is not defined by our circumstances.
From there, we found confidence in the assurance that God hears our audible cry in verse 4, no matter where we are.
And we witnessed that profound paradox of supernatural peace in verses 5 and 6, where true rest is achieved not by controlling the chaos, but by trusting God's active power to sustain us, which leads directly to fearlessness.
That stability then empowered David's bold, victorious appeal for intervention in verse 7, asking God to neutralize the power of the opposition.
And finally, that ultimate conclusion in verse 8. Salvation belongs solely to the Lord, transforming a personal crisis into a communal blessing.
This short psalm really is a complete roadmap for navigating betrayal, fear, and utter chaos with unshakable confidence.
And the central question Psalm 3 forces us to confront, the provocative thought we'd like to leave you with today, is this. If you are running from betrayal, from economic ruin, from an illness, are you prioritizing the supernatural rest offered by the presence of God over the frantic, fear-based need to solve the crisis in your own finite strength? Because if you truly believe God sustains you, you can sleep soundly, even when the very foundations of your life are shaking.
To solidify your understanding of this lesson, be sure to use the flashcards to review key terms and then take the quiz. Passing the quiz will mark this lesson as complete.
We look forward to exploring the depths of God's Word with you again soon as part of the You Need Faith in Jesus Team series.